Stay tuned for the end of this review for my season finale Christmas shoutouts. Hi folks, it's Christmas! Aw yeah folks, Christmas is here, and you know what that means? Gifts. More specifically, giving gifts. I don't know what it is about Christmas, but I feel extra giving when it comes to this time of year. And because I did something special for y'all last year, I decided to do it again this year. However, last Christmas, I didn't review something that was exactly seasonally oriented. This time around, due to some advice I took from Shasta here, I'm reviewing something with more of a holiday touch. I did indeed. We're going to be taking a look at the first Die Hard movie. And what makes this review even more special is that we have joining with us today the immeasurable, the unstoppable, my buddy to the darkest end, Dylan D-Laps Tomasi. Now, I know that there's far more Die Hard related stuff out there, but I want to concentrate on the first Die Hard film. We'll have to save the other Die Hard movies and games for the future. Anyway, I'm ready to start this little Yuletide shindig. How's about you, Shasta? Damn tootin'. When the movie begins, we're introduced to our main hero, John McClane, played by Bruce Willis, an NYC cop visiting his estranged wife in Los Angeles for Christmas. He apparently has a fear of flying, though, but that's okay, because the guy he's sitting next to tells him that he can get over his fear of flying by taking off his shoes and socks and making fists with his feet.
After you get where you're going, take off your shoes and your socks. Then you walk around on the rug barefoot and make fists with your toes.
Fists with your toes.
Something tells me that he's going to take that advice and it's going to come back to bite him in the ass. Anyway, we cut to this scene where a Christmas party is being held and we're introduced to McClane's wife, Holly. She works as a businesswoman for a corporation called Nakatomi, and she's quite career-oriented. Let's just say that that's caused a bit of friction between her and John. In fact, part of the reason John is in LA is because he wants to reconcile with Holly, as he explains here with the limo driver named Argyle.
She had a good job. Turned into a great career.
Now that meant she had to move here. Well, why'd you come with her, man? What's up?
Because I'm a New York cop. I got a 6-month backlog of New York scumbags I'm still trying to put behind bars. I can't just pick up and go that easy.
I can actually understand both John and Holly's points of view. Holly has a good job and she intends to keep it, whereas John is a good cop and he's got dangerous criminals to put away. I'm glad that they wrote the movie with these two having a bit of a conflict. Makes it more interesting. So John arrives at the Nakatomi building, he and Holly greet each other, and John asks if there's a place he can wash up. Whilst he cleans himself up a bit, he and Holly have a bit of an argument over her changing her last name.
You are a married woman, Holly. You're married to me.
We're going to have this conversation again. We did this in July.
We never finished this conversation in July.
I had
Yeah,
to take
right. No matter what the consequences, no matter what it did to our marriage,
it.
you had
It
to
didn't
take
do
this
anything to our marriage
opportunity.
except maybe change your idea of what our marriage
I
should
think
be.
you have a clue as to what my idea of our
I know
marriage should be,
exactly what your idea of our marriage should be.
After that little spat, these guys start to take over the building, and we're introduced to the villains of Die Hard. More specifically, this guy, Hans Gruber, played by Alan Rickman. I want to go on record here and say that Hans and his cronies are probably one of the best teams of villains ever put into an action movie. Now, he's not my favorite Die Hard villain. That honor goes to Colonel William Stewart and his guys in Die Hard 2. But he is my second favorite. I like that they made Gruber and his team sophisticated type villains. They're bad guys, but they're distinguished gentlemen too. Anyway, Gruber and his boys lock down the building and cut the phone lines. Next, they storm onto the floor where the Christmas party is being held, and they hold all the attendees, for the exception of John, of course, as hostages.
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Due to the Nakatomi Corporation's legacy of greed around the globe, they are about to be taught a lesson in the real use of power. You will be witnesses.
After introducing themselves to the crowd, Gruber and his men ask for the owner of the building, Mr. Takagi. Takagi gives himself up, and they take him to his office. There, Gruber asks about the code to a vault that contains millions of dollars worth of bearer bonds.
But I need the code key because I am interested in the $640 million in negotiable bearer bonds that you have locked in your vault. And the computer controls the vault.
So you see, Gruber and his buddies might seem like terrorists with an ideological stance, but in reality, that's just a ruse to hide what they really are, and that's bank robbers. Gotta hand it to the creators of this film. They really wrote the villains well. So Gruber gives Takagi an ultimatum: give him the code to the vault or be shot dead. Surprisingly, Takagi doesn't cooperate and he's promptly executed. After witnessing Takagi's murder, John flees the office and heads for the upper floors of the building. Whilst there, he gets the bright idea to pull the fire alarm, so that the authorities will come to the building. However, Gruber made a backup plan for that, and he sends one of his goons to the floor where the alarm was pulled. It's kind of like a game of cat and mouse between Gruber and John. The only difference here is that this cat and mouse have guns. Anyway, Gruber's goon searches around for John, but he bites off just a bit more than he can chew. Now that one of the bad guys is out of the way, John now has a CB radio and an HK-94 submachine gun. Needless to say, the playfield has now been leveled out a bit.
Now I have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho.
So after that, John heads to the roof and tries to get some help from the police. Unfortunately, this draws the attention of Gruber and his men, and they try to intercept John. Things are starting to heat up, and this movie is getting better by the minute. So the dispatch decides to send this policeman here over to check things out at the building. By the way, that's Reginald Vell Johnson playing the role of Officer Sergeant Al Powell. That's right, he's played by Carl Winslow from Family Matters. Fortunately for him, though, Urkel isn't around to fuck up his day. Could you just imagine Urkel running around in a movie like Die Hard? Anyway, John continues to fight with Gruber's henchmen a bit more, but he finds himself both outmanned and outgunned. So he decides to hide himself in an air vent. After that close call, John maneuvers around in the vent for a while and is almost shot by one of Gruber's men. Fortunately, he's not, and Powell makes his way to the building. He goes into the lobby, but as you'd have guessed, everything seems a-okay to him, and he decides to leave. Meanwhile, John gets into another shootout with two of Gruber's thugs and decides to throw one of the bodies onto Powell's patrol car. I think that got his attention. In this next scene, we're introduced to this character, Richard Thornburg, a sleazy newsman who'll pretty much go to any lengths to get a story. Fortunately, John's little stunt with the dead body has now gotten the full attention of the LAPD. However, Gruber was intending for the police to show up eventually. Seriously, this guy planned this heist out pretty goddamn well.
Fumble about outside and stay calm. This is simply the beginning. I thought I told all of you I want radio silence until further...
I'm very sorry, Hans. I didn't get that message. Maybe you should have put it on the bulletin board.
After taunting Gruber through the radio, John finds himself some C4 and says one of the greatest lines ever quoted in an action flick.
Yippee, motherfucker.
Now that's a classic quote from a film, right up there with lines like, "I'll be back," and "Yo, Adrian, I did it!" It's just fucking awesome. Anyway, we cut to this scene where Thornburg is trying to convince his boss to let him take one of the news trucks to report on what's happening at the building. His boss lets him, and we cut to this next scene where John and Powell are discussing the situation in the building.
I read you, pal. You the guy in the car?
What's left of him? Can you identify yourself?
Not now. Maybe later. Listen fast. This is a party line. The neighbor's got itchy trigger fingers. They got missiles, automatic weapons, and enough plastic explosives to orbit Arnold Schwarzenegger. They're down to 9 now, counting the skydiver you met. These guys are mostly European, judging by their clothing labels, and... cigarettes.
After that bit of exposition, we're introduced to the Deputy Chief of LAPD, Dwayne Robinson, and he's a very by-the-book policeman. You know the type. "Oh, you can't do that because that's against regulations." Some would say that that's a bit cliche, but I tend to like that trope when it's used. Anyway, we get back to the bad guys, and Holly puts in a request to Gruber so that the hostages can use the restroom. Gruber grants the request and asks Holly for her name. She decides to use her maiden name, Gennaro, for obvious reasons. We then cut to this next scene where the police are about ready to send in a SWAT team, but this proves to not be such a good idea. After having a few of their men wounded, the cops then send in an armored transport, but this too is not a good idea because Gruber's men have a rocket launcher at their disposal.
I see him! Medic! Man! toast.
But John doesn't take this sitting down, and he decides to use a C4 that he obtained earlier on Gruber's thugs.
Fuck it. So you take this under advisement, jerkweed. Geronimo, motherfucker.
After that little explosion, we find out via the news that Gruber used to be part of a West German terrorist organization called the Volksfrei. Think of the Red Army faction, but with reverse politics. Though, despite how interesting this little bit of info is, it doesn't really serve much of a point. As I said earlier, Gruber is essentially a bank robber, and he just uses terrorism as a guise. Oh, well, I guess you're right. So after having some dialogue between John and the cops, we cut to this scene where this character, named Ellis, tries to negotiate with Gruber. They get John on the radio, and Ellis tries to persuade John to tell Gruber where the rest of the explosives are. This goes about as good as you'd expect.
Shut up, Ellis. Just shut your mouth. Put Hans back on the line. Hans, this shithead does not know what kind of man you are, but I do. Listen.
Good. Then you'll give us what we want and save your friend's life. You're not part of this equation. It's time you realized that.
Hey, what am I, a method actor, Hans? Babe, put away the gun. This is radio, not television.
Hans, this asshole is not my friend. I just met him tonight. I don't know him. Jesus Christ, Ellis, these people are going to kill you. Tell them you don't know me.
John, how can you say that after all these years, huh? John. John.
After killing Ellis, Gruber threatens that he's gonna start shooting more hostages if John doesn't give him the explosives. Next, Gruber decides to put on his terrorist act again, and he tells the police to tell the American State Department to have other real terrorists around the world released from prison.
The following people are to be released from their captors. In Northern Ireland, the 7 members of the New Provo Front. In Canada, the 5 imprisoned leaders of Liberté de Québec. In Sri Lanka, the 9 members of the Asian Dawn.
What the fuck?
I read about them in Time magazine. When these revolutionary brothers and sisters are free, the hostages in this building will be taken to the roof, and they will accompany us in helicopters to the Los Angeles International Airport, where they will be given further instructions. You have 2 hours to comply.
In this next scene, Gruber goes looking for John himself, and surprise, surprise, he finds him. But Gruber, being the manipulative little son of a bitch that he is, decides to play himself off as one of the hostages. He and John then have a smoke, and Gruber reveals himself.
I'm going to count to 3.
Like you did with Takagi. Oops. No bullets. You think I'm fucking stupid, Hans?
During the firefight, Gruber tells one of his men to shoot the glass as it would injure the barefooted John. Yeah, called it. I knew being barefoot was going to come back to bite John in the ass. Or rather, his toes. Bite me, mutt. So after that shootout, Gruber gets the explosives back, and John has to now patch his feet up. Whilst trying to fix his injuries, John and Powell have a little conversation. As it turns out, Powell used to be a street cop, but got demoted after an unfortunate run-in with a kid.
I had an accident.
The way you drive, I can see why. What'd you do? Run over your captain's foot with the car.
I shot a kid. He was 13 years old. Oh, it was dark. I couldn't see him. He had a ray gun, looked real enough. You know, when you're a rookie, they can teach you everything about being a cop except how to live with a mistake.
Oh, don't beat yourself up too much over it, pal. We all make mistakes. It happens to the best of us. In this next scene, the FBI's been called in and they decide to cut the electricity to the building. However, this is precisely what Gruber wants, as cutting power to the building would finally open up Takagi's vault. The most epic vault opening in the history of cinema! Anyway, the bad guys start bagging up all the goodies in the vault, and the FBI plan to send in some helicopters. We later cut to this scene where that slimy news guy, Thornburg, tells Holly's babysitter here that if she doesn't let him interview Holly and John's kids, he'll report her to the INS. Because if you're not getting what you want, extort. So after that bit of back alley persuasion, we get to this scene where John searches for why Gruber was looking for him in the first place. He finds some explosives ready to blow the roof, and he tries to warn the cops and the FBI. But uh-oh, one of Gruber's boys discovers John, and the two fight. Whilst that's going on, Gruber is told about the approaching helicopters and, thanks to that asshole news reporter, finds out that Holly is John's wife.
Mrs. McLean. Honors to make your acquaintance.
We then cut to this scene where Gruber has ordered his lackeys to move the hostages to the roof. We also see more of the fight between John and the aforementioned bad guy. Something tells me that that's not the end of that dude. After that little brawl, John gets to the roof and tries to get everyone back to the lower floors before the explosives go off. However, the FBI think that John is one of Gruber's men and they start shooting at him. John knows that he has to get out of there fast, what with the bombs and bullets and all, so he decides to wrap a fire hose around himself and bungee jump to one of the floors below. untie himself from that hose. Well, as you'd expect, the weight of that hose starts to pull John down. Fortunately, it does come loose, and John goes on a search for Holly. In this next scene, the bad guys start to load up their truck in the garage, but because Argyle is there, and because he has a heart of gold, he stops them. John, meanwhile, finally catches up with Gruber, and the final showdown begins.
So that's what this is all about? Fucking robbery?
Put down the gun.
Why'd you have to nuke the whole building, Hans?
Well, when you steal $600, you can just disappear. When you steal 600 million, they will find you unless they think you're already dead. Put down the gun.
Mine, this is mine. You got me.
Still the cowboy, Mr. McLean. Americans, all alike.
You made a pretty good cowboy yourself, Hans.
Oh, yes. What was it you said to me before? Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
After shooting him, Gruber grabs onto Holly and the two dangle outside a window, but before he can do anything, John loosens Holly's watch and Gruber falls to his death.
Well, I hope that's not a hostage.
I would say that that's it, but we're not done yet. Not without a few loose ends to tie up. So after saving his wife, John and Holly share a passionate kiss, and they get out of the building. Later outside, John finally acquaints himself with Powell, and the two have a bro hug. Well, looks like everything's in order, and oh shit, there's one more thug! Nice shooting, pal. Anyway, the movie ends pretty happily. That dickweed Thornburg gets a well-deserved punch in the face, Argyle takes John and Holly home, and they all ride off into the Christmas dawn. And that was Die Hard, folks, and it gets an E for excellent. This film is a fucking classic. Not only is it a classic as an action movie, but also as a Christmas movie. And you know what? I don't care that this film is rated R. I recommend this movie to families. Yeah, get the kids together, your significant other, huddle around the TV, break out the popcorn, and have a good time. This is a movie that many people have seen, and if you haven't, you owe it to yourself to watch it. It's especially delightful to view this film around this time of year, too. It's both a Christmas movie and an action movie. What could possibly be better than that? Now, I could go on and on about how this film is so good, but as I mentioned in the beginning of this review, I have the great and powerful D-Labs to do that. Okay, Dylan, it's all you, buddy.
Do it the hard way.
Now, the last thing McLean wants, is to be a hero, but he doesn't have a choice.
Thank you very much, Redneck, and I'm happy to be here. Hello, everybody, and I'm here to review Die Hard. Yeah. Now, honestly, I probably watch Die Hard 2 times a year because I enjoy the film. It's a good movie, and if you think I kind of get bored of it, no, because it's awesome. Everything about it is awesome. It's the perfect action movie. You can't get any better than this. You got a young Bruce Willis with only a few films under his belt, probably doing the best performance he's ever done in his entire life. You got Alan Rickman, best villain of them all. Also, this film is full of a great supporting cast, from the hostages to the villains. They're all excellent. All the action scenes are top notch because they feel kind of gritty and realistic. And I really love how Bruce Willis is kind of a anti-hero. He doesn't really want to be there to save anybody. He kind of thinks the whole thing's a pain in the ass. Actually, there are several moments in the film where you see Bruce Willis trying to call out for help to other police officers because he doesn't really want to be the hero. If you look at the other action movies and the action stars of the 80s, the hero is always this big tough guy that can never get hurt, kicks everyone's ass, and walks out at the end of the day with a smile on his face. But not John McClane. He takes damage. Like cut up, shot up, thrown through things, bleeding feet. You see a lot of damage on him that you normally don't see in an action movie. Usually the hero comes out with one scratch doing Van Damme kicks and fucking flying in the air, while Bruce Willis is taking fucking damage. But all around, this is a really good Christmas movie because I don't know why, it just feels like a Christmas movie. It has a little rap song at the beginning about Christmas, and at the end it does a Jingle Bells song or whatever, but it just feels like Christmas. And this movie is quite violent with lots of swearing and people like getting their heads blown off, and you wouldn't think that as a Christmas movie, but it nails it. So I'm going to rate this a 9.5. It's an excellent film. I'm not going to tell you why I'm giving the 0.5 there. That's kind of my personal thing. I'm going to keep secret forever until I die. But thank you very much, Redneck, for letting me be on your channel, because I love being here. Please check out all these other videos. They're great. And thank you. Choo.
Thank you, Dylan. That was superb. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Chest. Well, folks, this episode marks the end of my second season reviewing stuff here on YouTube. But before Shasta and I hang it up for the year, I'd like to give a few shout-outs to some truly awesome people. I'd also like to give a big thank you as well for believing in me and giving me that extra push to keep going. Anyway, here are the shout-outs. The first person I want to give a shout out to is the YouTuber MisterWii. MisterWii, if you're watching, I want to give you a big old thank you for being such a cool dude and for making such good reviews. Check this guy out. He makes reviews that are sweet, quick, and to the point. The next person I want to give a shout out to is yet another YouTube reviewer by the name of Retro Game Bookcase Reviews. He reviews a lot more obscure titles, and he's hella good at giving a quick yet very detailed rundown on them. So, Merry Christmas, Retro, and keep on being awesome. Coming up thirdly, we have Dimi V Gaming. Now, this fella is quite interesting. He does reviews, but he also does Let's Plays. Now, I can't do that myself. It's either one or the other for me. So, hats off to this guy. He's one hell of a multitasker, and he has good taste in games. I hope y'all have a very Merry Christmas, Dimi, and I hope to see you in the new year. Anyway, next on my list is Ed's Retro Geek Out. Now, this guy is a collector, and he has far more games than even I have. It's damn fucking impressive. He also collects retro toys and music CDs. Check him out. He gives tips on how to collect for certain things. Ed, if you're watching this, I want you to have yourself a Merry Christmas and keep on collecting all those goodies. The next shout out that I'd like to give is to the two dudes that run the channel Chasing the Classics. Like Ed's Retro Geek Out, they also collect video games, toys, and other awesome stuff. They also have a much better collection of games than I do. In fact, I'm a little jealous. I'm just kidding. I want to wish you guys a Merry Christmas and thank y'all for believing in me. Coming up at number 6 is Kjartan The Viking. This guy reviews games, but he also talks about martial arts. More specifically, European martial arts. The fact that he talks about that subject is really freaking cool to me, because I'm actually pretty into martial arts myself. Oh, and he's also a Lord of the Rings fan, and I am too. So that's another thing we have in common. Anyway, Kjartan, I wish you a Merry Christmas and a kick-ass New Year. Next on the nice list is RTP Gaming. One thing that I love about this guy is that he's a South Park fan, and so am I. It's always awesome when you come across a fellow South Parker. He also does Let's Plays on his channel, and that's really cool because he gives some really funny commentary whilst doing that. So RTP, I hope that your Christmas is very merry, and I hope to find y'all around once the new year hits. Now we move on to a channel called the S Squad. Now this is a channel ran by 3 people, and they review video games, very, very well done reviews might I add. They also collect video games and video game related accessories. I want to put in a request right now to the S Squad if they're watching. If you guys ever come across the Power Glove for the NES, I really want you to do a review of it. Anyway, I hope you 3 have a Merry Christmas and keep making awesome content. We move now to a really interesting guy by the name of Radarcannon. This fellow loves FPS games, just like I do. And he makes reviews too. Rad, if you're watching, I do a yearly special called FPS Time, and it runs from February to March. All I do throughout these 2 months is review FPS games, and I usually like to add a second opinion. So if you want to, contact me via Facebook, and I'll tell you what I'm planning to review during 2018's FPS Time. And maybe you could give some second opinions on those videos. Other than that, I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Now I move on to a couple old friends that I have, and they've helped and been with me through thick and thin this year. Firstly, we have the White Phoenix. This guy loves doing Let's Plays, but he really loves to do live streams. He's funny, he's intelligent, he has hella good taste in video games, and he's just a really, really nice person. I'm glad that he's my friend. And if you're watching, Phoenix, I hope for you to have a rockin' ass Christmas and keep your fire burning for the new year. Finally, we come to the immortal Dylan D-Labs Tomasi. This is not just a shout out, but also a very, very, very big thank you to him. Without Dylan, I don't think I would have gotten as many reviews out as I have this year. He also provided a much needed pizzazz to my reviews. The guy does reviews of his own, and in fact, they're much better than mine. He mostly reviews movies, and that's really fucking awesome because that, to me, is hard to do. It's one of the reasons that I don't review films as often as I review video games, so check this dude out. He's an amazing person. Dylan, I hope that you have a fantastic Christmas, and I really hope that things go well for you next year with Edmonton behind the mic. Well, people, that does it for this year, but I dearly hope to see all of you back in January when we kick off season number 3. Goodbye, folks, and as always, y'all come back now, alright?